The topic of archaeoastronomy could take a whole semester by itself, so these videos just attempt a short outline. The learning goal of this video is to understand that modern astronomy was shaped by cultures worldwide that developed since the dawn of mankind. In 500 AD in India, astronomers developed a system in which the Earth was spinning on its axis and considered the motion of the planets with respect to the sun. So in other words, a heliocentric model of the solar system or the universe. In his book, he presented astronomical and mathematical theories in which the Earth was spinning on its axis and the periods of the planets were given with respect to the sun. By the 6th century, several Indian scientists also advanced the idea of gravity. They noticed a special force keeps objects stuck to the earth and hypothesized that that same force might be responsible for holding heavenly bodies in their place. And this idea predates Newton's concepts of gravity by about 1100 years. China based its calendar on the phases of the moon, and since the solar year is not evenly divisible by the exact number of lunar months, the Chinese calendar had a 13-month year every 2 or 3 years. On a Chinese star map, each of the 4 directions contains 7 of the 28 mansions, and together with the central region of the sky, synonymous with the emperor and therefore China itself, these regions make up what are known as the 5 cardinal points. It is important to note that the 4 animals shown here are entirely unrelated to the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. The Chinese zodiac is designed to help guide the life of people on Earth, and in their version of the zodiac, which they called the yellow path, which was a reference to the sun traveling along the ecliptic, and like in Western astrology, Chinese had 12 houses along their yellow path. Also shown here is a Chinese comet atlas tied to the belief that events on Earth are corresponding to the events we see in the sky, and the belief that emperors were chosen by heaven to rule. The royal astronomers were expected to watch the sky very carefully and keep accurate records on the movements of the stars and planets, and record events such as Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet appears in the sky every 70 to 75 years, and Chinese astronomers recorded every instance of Halley's Comet from 3,000 years ago. China is the only civilization in the world to have done so. The Duhuang map, this star map, is one of the first known graphical representations of stars from ancient Chinese astronomy, and it dates to the Tang Dynasty. The International Duhuang Project writes about its rediscovery on their website. In the early 20th century, a secret cave, now known as the Library Cave, was discovered in the Buddhist Mogao Cave Complex, just outside the Silk Road town of Dunhuang in northwest China. This cave had been sealed for thousands of years and contained around 40,000 manuscripts, paintings, and printed documents on silken paper. Among them was a manuscript containing the oldest manuscript star atlas known today from any civilization, probably dating around AD 700. It shows a complete representation of the Chinese sky in 13 charts with over 1,300 stars, named and accurately presented. The chart contains much information that has proven very useful for modern astronomers. And here we can see the North Celestial Circumpolar stars on the left, and hopefully you can make out Orion in the constellation on the right. The Chinese also made an incredible observation that they recorded in the year 1054. They saw a supernova. They referred to this as a guest star and recorded where they saw it and for how long it was bright. The supernova created what we see today as the Crab Nebula, and because we have this recording in ancient China, we know what caused that nebula. American Indians in the Southwest used knowledge of astronomy to contend with a largely unforgiving environment. Despite the lack of rain, those who lived in the Southwest grew crops with enough bounty to feed tens of thousands during the brief growing season. Casa Rinconada is the circular feature in the Google Earth image. The horizontal line indicates the distance of 20 meters, and the circle is indicating the 4 geographic directions clockwise: north, east, south, and west. The symmetry axis, defined by the two T-shaped doors, is aligned to the north-south line within 20 arc minutes. Small niches lining the interior wall are equally spaced in position so that lines defining by the opposite pairs of niches all have their center within 4 inches of the kiva center, which also indicates that the kiva walls depart very little from a perfect circle. This circular masonry foundation sockets for the 4 roof posts on the kiva floor form a square also centered on the kiva center within 4 inches, with sides oriented to within 30 minutes of either north-south or east-west directions. Shortly after sunrise on the summer solstice, around June 21st, a beam of sunlight shines through the lone window on the north-northeast side of the kiva and moves downward and northward until it illuminates on the interior west wall one of the 5 larger irregular spaced niches in the kiva. This has been hypothesized to be an intentional construct aimed at marking and celebrating the summer solstice, and some archaeoastronomers believe that offerings were placed in that niche. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming has 28 spokes, the same number used in roofs of ceremonial lodges. The wheel was built between 1200 and 1700 AD. The central cairn is the oldest part. Excavations have shown it extends below the wheel and has been buried by wind-blown dust. Alberta has about 66% of all the known medicine wheels, which suggests that southern Alberta was a central meeting place for many of the Plains tribes who followed the medicine wheel ceremonies, usually on the summer solstice. At the end of the wheel, there is a raised central cairn and several others on the periphery of the wheel. These have been alleged to have astronomical alignments. Astronomer John Eddy suggested that a line drawn between the central cairn and an outlying cairn on the Bighorn Medicine Wheel pointed to within 1/3 of a degree of the rising point of the sun at the summer solstice. The actual astronomical purpose of the design of the wheels remains controversial. The design may have also assisted in the performance of specific rituals and ceremonies that have been lost to us. The 28 spokes could indicate the lunar month. For Mayans, timekeeping and all of astronomy was relegated to the priest astronomers, and they exclusively used celestial motions and alignments. On the practical side, days started at sunrise, and predictions assisted their agricultural industry. The Mayan priest astronomers recorded Mayan cosmology on codices. Most have been lost as they were intentionally burned by the Spanish. In the codex shown all the way to the right, Mayan cosmology is portrayed as a multi-layered universe consisting of 13 layers of heavens and 9 layers of the underworld, with Earth sandwiched in between and belonging to both. According to researcher Michael Coe, in the Mayan multi-layer universe, the Earth is one layer and is layer 1 in the upper world and the underworld. It is conceptualized as a large wheel surrounded by the ocean and extends to the horizon. The second layer houses the moon and clouds. The stars lie in the next layer, and the sun in the fourth, while Venus, the great star, inhabits the fifth. Layer 6 represents unidentified constellation, where also the comets are living, and where the fire serpents attend to their duty of bringing the sun from the east to the zenith. The 7th layer is a fierce, windy, and stormy place. The 8th layer is a blue heaven where the dust lies, and the 9th layer is the home of thunder, where stone slabs crash together. Then there's layers 10 and 11 and 12, Finally, the last layer is where the dual male-female god who created space and time lives. The 9-layer underworld also played a significant part in Mayan cosmology. The Milky Way was seen as a road of souls traveling to the underworld. To Mayan, space and time were inevitably twined. Their complex calendar system combines spatial attributes of the universe, such as animals and plants, with temporal movements around astronomical objects. The Sun, Moon, and Venus all held very significant roles. Venus was considered to be connected to a major deity, Quetzalcoatl. The Mayans knew that it was the same object that appears both in the morning and the evening at different times of the year, and determined its synodic period, that's how long it takes to orbit the sun, to be 584 days, which is really close to the 583.92 days that it is. When the Mayans calculated the synodic periods of Mars as 780 days, where the actual value is 779.936 days, and Mercury is 117 days when the actual is around 116 days. But they seemed uninterested in Jupiter and Saturn and other bright planets. Other than Venus, the planets seem to be regarded as stars. They practiced a form of astrology. The Mayan calendar has its origins in the 5th century. It moves in cycles, with the last cycle ending in December 2012. This has often been interpreted as when the world would end, December 2012 at 11:11 UTC. But conspiracy theorists found out that's not when the world really ended. And what the Mayans meant to do was just start their calendar over again. Machu Picchu is located in the northeast of Cusco, Chile. Machu Picchu is an Incan citadel set high in the Andes Mountains in Peru, above the Urubamba River Valley. The citadel is the core fortified area of a town or a city. It may be a fortress, castle, or fortified center or little city. It was constructed in the 15th century and then later abandoned. Sophisticated dry stone walls that fuse huge blocks without the use of mortar, intriguing buildings that play on astronomical alignments, and panoramic views attract intrigue tourists and are an area of active research for archaeoastronomers to uncover the meaning of and the use of these facilities and their daily lives of Incans. A number of NASA writes that the biggest source of controversy in interpreting what an ancient monument was used for also involves whether the alignment is real or accidental. It is often hard to make this call unless you have some other supporting information, such as the same alignment is also found on other buildings or monuments of a particular civilization. Here we see New York City in the present era with a grid of roads that ultimately results in alignments. There are the azimuthal degrees of 7 degrees from the top left to the lower right, and 120 degrees from the top right to the lower left, and they are crossed by Broadway Street, which has an azimuthal angle of 100 degrees. Southbound traffic drives directly into the rising sun on April 29th for the roads that go from the top left to the lower right, and on February 28th for the roads that go from the lower left to the top right. These alignments are not intentional to be solar alignments. Now, southbound Broadway travelers between December 31st and January 4th have a major issue with the rising sun directly in their eyes. Of course, there are no special events or rituals taking place in New York around New Year's Day, are there? So let's think, if we're a future archaeoastronomer thinking back on New York City today and taking a look at Broadway Street, would we think, oh, they had a major celebration of the New Year on December 31st, and look at this, southbound Broadway travelers are seeing the rising sun, an alignment with Broadway Street and the solar solstice, sort of, not quite, but with a celebration of time. So the take-home message of this lecture is simply a reiteration of some of those science literary standards. In addition to reinforcing knowledge that because the Earth turns daily on its axis and is tilted relative to the plane of the Earth's yearly orbit around the sun, and sunlight falls more intensely on different parts of the Earth year-round, the difference in heating produces the planet's seasons and weather patterns. In addition to all that, we've seen how that impacts the daily life of mankind throughout our evolution. These other benchmarks were addressed as well. For example, important contributions to the advancement of science, mathematics, and technology have been made by different kinds of people in different cultures at different times. The early Egyptian, Greek, Chinese, Hindu, and Arabic cultures are responsible for many scientific and mathematical ideas and technologies and innovations. Patterns and relationships. Although mathematics began long ago, the practical problems is soon focused on abstractions from the material world and then on even more abstract relations among these abstractions. Engineers, architects, and others who engage in design and technology use scientific knowledge to solve practical problems, but they usually have to take human values and limitations into account as well. And finally, geometric figures, diagrams, and maps can be used to represent objects, events, and processes in the real world, although such representations can never be exact in every detail.